you and your dad this time. Definitely excited about what we're going to talk about today, and really grateful to be able to tell my story last time. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for coming back on and liking the
Yeah.
show enough to come back on. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, I just wanted to give a shout out where shout outs due. Like I had mentioned, we had met literally just yesterday, virtually. And so I didn't really know much about your show, but listening to your show, I mean, you guys really have something going on here, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it and grateful to have the conversation. So I know we have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to dive right in. And so last time we were talking about my story, my personal testimony of how I was raised in a dichotomy of two worlds, one of extreme religion and alignment with the satanic occult. In that situation, went through really severe and inhumane abuse as a child, a lot of adversity that was perpetual trauma for the extent of my early developmental years, teenage years, and even young adult life. And, during that time, I was always in the pursuit of truth. I just wanted to understand what it is that happened to me. And so, uh, as I pursued that in my life and I experienced these things that we talked about and we're going to talk about today, Christ revealed himself in me through it. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I know I talked to you yesterday about well, did you want to talk certainly about certain entities, or do you want me to talk
Uh,
about my story and how my experience with it?
yeah, I want to talk about the ones that you seen, the experiences
Okay.
that you had, and the knowledge that you have on them, where they're from, why do you think they're there? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like certain
Sure.
demons attached to different sins, I guess, I mean,
Oh, absolutely. Generational stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. So like I said before, I come from, two different bloodlines. I know I talked about Gary Wayne, seeing him on your show, and following in his work in lines with, elite bloodlines. And one of the bloodlines that he talks about is the Basque bloodline, and the Royale bloodline. I more talked about a little bit about my father's side on the Spanish and, Jewish side of that history, coming from the Levitical priest line. My mom's side of the family really kind of goes up towards that Royale family that Gary Wayne talks about, where they consider themselves Roy being, that French for king, and then the Al being, angels of God or kings of God, stemming from essentially like I would say a Nephilim type of bloodline. And I know I'm kind of diving right into kind of some weird, sayings there, but in my family, bloodline is taken very seriously, and I'm setting the stage and the precedent of what brought me into a level where I was able to see these things to begin with. Does that make sense?
yes.
Okay. So I want to just give people a clear picture of what we're dealing with here. So this type of being able to see these things has been passed down to generation and generation to generation. And as I had mentioned before, as where my father was going to be chosen to be a priest in the order of the patriarchal line of priests in that bloodline. On my mom's side of the family, the more of the Native American side, there was a mystical, knowledge that has been passed down through generations in a way of a recruitment for, I would say, secret chiefs. I'm not sure if you've heard that terminology before.
No, that's new to me. Secret
So
chiefs.
yeah, so secret chiefs is along the lines of ancient mystical and esoteric knowledge, stemming from, I would say, like, traditions that Crowley, right, ended up adopting and establishing Thelema, right, and things like that.
Cool.
Yeah, so because at one point we're going to get into like why some of these rituals are done, and even why some of them even summon these types of entities. All that stuff is done through magical practices, magic with the K, essentially.
Right.
So yeah, so with leading from that into my early life, that's what I believe happened to me. I genuinely, now knowing what I know, having gone back and gone through the recovery process, was being recruited at a very young age to be, essentially in an initiate and a member of the dark arts, right, or the dark occult. There was an evil intent that was done to me, and I was called evil. When I started to be abused when I was around 5 or 6 years old, it was through again, not for kids. It was through, anal sex. I was raped when I was 5, and I was told that once this initiation thing would happen, that I would have a connection with the divine, and that my divine spark would activate, and I would be able to see what other people cannot see. And that's exactly what happened. I started to see entities shortly after I was molested, when I was raped. I it felt there was something that happened within me. I mentioned my body felt like it was going into an earthquake. It felt like something. I had this really weird sensation, pressure in my forehead. I can still remember it, and I was kind of like in this state of disattachment from my physical body. And I never really, till this day, have never really felt like I have been able to fully connect with my physical self. So that's why, today, I've started that beautifully broken Rumble channel to kind of go into more detail of things that happen and why I feel this way, and that how I feel that me being broken in such a way as that allowed for the Holy Spirit to then guide me to the truth that is Jesus Christ, and to bring me forward to spreading His good news. So anyway, so around that time when I had first gotten molested, uh, I was at home. I told you about the shadow character, so the Kachina doll. Seeing it come out of a painting, it looked like a gray alien. Um, Jumped out the window, physically jumped out the window. Uh, it was a little bit at that age. I didn't really understand it. Now I definitely knew it was a shape shifting gray alien type creature, but I knew that it was demonic in nature. Okay. Just because of the frequency that it was giving off, and you could just tell. When we moved into this home, it was pretty rinky-dink. Okay, we had been essentially homeless up until that time. We lived in a little teardrop trailer, but we had gotten this single wide trailer that was purchased by my dad from the local Native American tribe. And this thing, it must have had ritual magic that had been done in there, because it was riddled with, occult symbolism in the home, all the things like that. And so that first manifestation for me of me seeing those things correlating with after I had been raped, I think is what caused me to actively start seeing these things. Very shortly after this, there was one night where we were at a Bible study with my godparents, and they'd always would pull me aside. After the Bible study, we would have food and, kind of just, quote unquote fellowship, and I'm this little kid just, in the mix with it. And these people would come up to me. Sometimes people, like my godparents, but sometimes people that I didn't know would come up to me, and they would tell me, um, especially the ones that were involved and knew what was going on with my abuse. Okay, because there was several people in the community that were involved, all right, on different levels. And they would tell me, you're special, and you're going to be coming contact with your spirit guide. You're going to have a spirit guide that's going to guide you through your enlightenment of who you are, okay, and why you're going to be used by God. So at this point, I'm very confused. Still trying to, I'm like 6 years old at this point, trying to figure out what's going on. Five, just about turning 6. And I remember one night, so I had this in my consciousness already. And I remember one night we're sleeping in this new home, and there's a bunk bed, and my uncle was staying on the front, just me and my brother, and on the bottom bunk, my sister would stay with my parents usually. And my dad used to work graveyard. He worked the graveyard shift, and he's a big gamer. Back then, Super Mario Brothers was like the game on Nintendo, and that's 90s when you had the cathode ray tube TV, and you turn it on and it goes boom, you could hear the TV turn on, right? And so every night when my dad would come home from work, he would turn on this Nintendo and play games for a while. Well, every now and again, I would get super excited because I would be like, "Hey, my dad's home. I haven't seen him all day. I want to go say hi and play some video games with him." So one night, this happened. I heard the TV turn on, and I woke up, and I was like excited. I was like, "Oh, my dad came home," but I didn't hear any moving around. All I heard was the TV turn on, and then I heard the video game starting to play. So I got up out of my bed and I went out, walked down the hallway, and when I walked into the living room, I was very surprised to not see my dad there. Instead, there was a young boy who was about my same age, looked about my same age, and he had a shaved head. He had like a buzzed haircut with a dirty muscle shirt on. Like it had been playing outside all day, and I remember he had like reddish brown shorts, and he was barefoot, and he just looked like a rough and tough kid. I didn't recognize him, and so I asked, like in shock, I said, "Hey, what are you doing in my house?" Like, I'm just kid. This kid just randomly comes into my house. Like, is he from like we didn't have that much neighbors. Like, where'd this kid come from? Well, when he turns around and he looks at me, I immediately am frozen because he looks at me with these completely black eyes. He had just pure black eyes. There was no white. It was just all black. And I just froze, you know. And I felt like as if he was speaking to me in my mind. And he said that, "Oh, I'm here to guide you. You've been through a lot lately, and I'm here to guide you." And I was like, "Oh, are you my spirit guide?" I'm like 5, 6 years old, right? Like, "Oh, are you my spirit guide?" And I'm thinking, okay, they told me that this would come. So I have this like spirit guide, and I'm like, "How do you know what I've been through?" And he says, I know. I'm a little bit different than people that you know." And he says, "I'm here to help you to get through it because you're going to go through more difficult times. And you could just talk to me. I'll just be right here. You just call my name, and I'll be here with you." And I said, "Well, what's your name?" And he says, "Well, my name is Galio." And I clearly remember his name is Galio. And so that was like the first like legit interaction that I had with an entity. And I'll stop there because I don't know if you have any questions or what you think of that.
Sounds like those black-eyed kids, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And we interviewed someone on that experienced one. I think it was a little girl,
Hmm.
and all he got was a sinister feeling about it,
Hmm.
and he was just frozen with fear.
Hmm.
And I don't. In my opinion, I think obviously they're from Satan's kingdom. I mean, they have to
I
be.
do. I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with
And his
you.
name is
And
Gallo.
Yeah,
his
I
name is
never.
Galileo.
Isn't that like a Greek name?
I don't know. Honestly, I've never looked it up or
That's
never thought
interesting.
to look it up and see what it
Yeah, the
means.
name's interesting to me. Galileo, like Galileo. I
Yeah.
mean, it sounds like some kind of
Yeah,
Greek.
it was Yeah, it was very specifically Galileo. And yeah, and I could feel I could definitely feel like it was dark. It was a dark energy. Okay. I felt it, but it seemed like I was groomed to feel that feeling because I felt that feeling of terror and horror when I saw that gray alien type thing come out of that photo. Okay. And but when by the time that happened, you have to remember too, I was in a state of like, I don't know, shock. You know what I mean? Like because of what had happened to me, I felt disconnected. So I felt like this continual like reverberation, you know, and it was very strong at that point. And so when I experienced this thing, I almost felt like we connected, like there was like a Wi-Fi signal that or a Bluetooth connection, right? That occurred, and that I was able to communicate with this thing. I don't know um if that makes sense, but that's how what I experienced it as. Okay. Um, so then I became friends with this thing because at that point that I'm in this mindset that God had abandoned me. Like what I had talked about in the last episode, right? In this mindset at this age, I had rejected God and I rejected faith because I was told that I was evil, and I was told that evil is going to be used for good and that I'm still fulfilling God's plan. So in a way, I feel like now doing research that I've been saved and completely, recanted and denounced any of those demonic and satanic things. Looking back now, I'm seeing it with a different set of eyes of like, you know what? I think I was being recruited, to the dark side. I don't know if that, if that's just crazy talk or what, but yeah. So
Wow, that's pretty intense. So how long did without skipping anything, how long did this spirit guy stick around?
it stuck around until, well, honestly, I still see it from time to time.
Wow. What kind?
Um,
Did you have a conversation with it? What were the conversations about if you did? Do you remember?
well, it knows that I know what it is,
Okay.
you know, and so it has stopped bothering me. But the last time that I saw it was just before I moved to Las Vegas around this time last year.
So it hadn't
So
matured. It's still a little kid,
no,
right?
it matured with me.
Oh wow, that's a trip.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we it's like, it grew up with me, you know. And this thing would give me access to knowledge, you know. He would tell me, hey, this person's going to die, or um this event is going to happen, it gave me like, like psychic ability, I would say things to people before they would say it, and they'd be like, how did you know, I was thinking that? I'm like, I didn't. I can't read your mind, but I just knew you were going to say it. And so anyway, it's just weird.
That's crazy.
But
Yeah.
anyway, so yeah, so and this thing, it did provide me in a weird sense, a form of comfort, because when you're locked in a dark room and you're raped over and over again, I mean, you want comfort. You know what I mean? So I had to attach to something, and to me, God wasn't there. you know and so that was my experience. To me, I felt like God was not there. And so, at some point, when it happens so much, you give into this, perception of, this is my role in life. My role in life is to be used in this way. And but there was a benefit to it. Things started to happen. um Things started to happen for me, and that we can go into that more later. But so yeah, so that was one entity there. Let's see, after that, uh gosh, I mean, it kind of just opened the floodgates. I mean, I noticed that I took a different favor. I seemed to gain more favor with my grandfather, especially. And he would have me over at his house, and like I said, the three witches that lived, on around his compound, and then the warlock that lived, a little bit to the northeast or northwest. um they noticed that something was different in me. They were never involved in any of that, um that was done to me, but not directly, like physically doing those things. But I knew that, like, they had some kind of influence and power. you know so I mean, even to be, talking about entities, to be around witches themselves, um is a thing. And so my grandfather, we were staying at his house. I was still pretty young. Like I said, he had five different wives, and he had many mistresses. He has over 20 children. I mean, he has many children. And so one winter we're staying with him, and he had this ability. I don't know. It's kind of weird to talk about. Um, he came one time home, and he seemed to be in a weird mood. He just looked different. He was in this different kind of mindset. I know he was drunk. He was on drugs, and he came up the stairs and he said he was talking to somebody. He looked like he had his hand over somebody, but I couldn't see anybody. There was just nobody there.
Oh wow.
And he says, Mijito, open up the door, open up the door. He says, let us in, in Spanish, let us in. And I'm like, let us in. I'm like, my grandpa's so drunk, like he thinks he's two people. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like laughing my head off because I'm used to seeing him like this all the time. So I open the door, comes in, he says, "Ven, vente pa acá," and he's calling somebody in. And then next thing you know, I feel this like really dark chill all over the room. And he says, Mijito, he says, I want you to meet the princess. And I'm like, the princess? He says, yes. He says, this is one of my lovers who I love very much, and her name is Lilith.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, whoa. Well, I'm like, what? And I'm like, come on, who are you talking to? There's nobody there. And he says, no, 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 Mijito. He says, she's here. You just can't see her right now.
Wow.
He says, because you're not ready to see her right now. He says, but she's here. I'm like, you're full of it. He's like, I'll show you. So he says, siéntense. And I kid you not, there was an impression in the couch of somebody actually sitting there. In that moment, I completely became frozen and I actually passed out. I don't remember anything after that. All I remember is waking up, and I was in my bedroom and I was like freaked out. Like I ran out and I was like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? And my grandfather's like, oh no, Miko, you just had a bad dream. So I don't know what happened there, after that experience. So that was another one.
Wow,
Um,
it's crazy, man. Lilith,
yeah,
all the names. That's like
yeah.
a demon, the female demon.
Well,
Yeah.
and I've actually done some research into that too, and I feel like there's like, I don't know if it's just like one or if it's just like a type. I don't know, like, because I've heard that, I've heard it before, and my brother has had some dealings with it, and also too, just a quick side note. I'm not sure how my brother feels about this yet. I haven't really talked to him about me coming on the show quite yet. Well, he knows I was, but my brother, he has bipolar schizophrenia, and he went through the same, if not worse, than what I did. And we've been doing recent work with him, through Dan Duval, right? Dan Duval had turned me on to this type of, what's the word, deliverance ministry.
Right. Yeah, deliverance.
So yeah, so that's what we're kind of going down. But anyway, so that's where we're at so far. But I mean, do you guys have any questions at this point, or comments? I'm gonna take a drink of water.
I was just thinking back to the last time you saw that entity. Were the
Yeah.
eyes were the eyes still black, or were they just normal?
No, it was black. They were still black. Um, the eyes were still black. This time when it came to see me, it actually was the first time. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Um, it was the second time that it got physically aggressive with me. So,
How so?
it actually choked me. So, I woke up. I woke up in the middle of the night. Sleep paralysis, not being able to move, and so I astral projected out of my body, and I, basically proclaimed in the name of Jesus, let go of me. And when he let go of me, I was in this weird kind of in between state, but I could see him at the doorway of my bedroom. And it physically opened my doorway. I was living with a friend, and they had freaked out because the door had opened. And so, he was drinking coffee and he thought that was weird that my door had just opened like that. But I was in the room having this like, this in between. And every time this would happen, there was always this like reverberation. Whenever I'd see him, it was like a reverberation, like we were in some kind of a space, you know. It's hard to explain.
Like a bubble, right? It's like a bubble.
Yeah, yeah,
Never.
it was kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like when I was with him, he was able to like I was, yeah, it's like you're in this bubble, and I could see him, but my friend, he couldn't see him. He just saw the door move, right? And so anyway, so this thing was choking me, and I like got him off of me, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing here? You're not allowed here. You know, you're not allowed here. You leave in the name of Jesus. And he told me this. He says, I'll leave. He says, but I'll leave you. He says, but I'm here to tell you that the season of death is coming in your life, and your life as you know it is about to fall apart. And I'm here to try to help you. I'm like, you're trying to kill me. Like, what are you trying? I don't believe your lies. Like, I'm not gonna claim or believe what you have to say. And he says, but just know this. He says, the season of death is coming in your life.
Hmm.
And so I just was like, okay, well, it went away. And sure enough, I got a call from my mom the next day that my grandmother had died. And so it was a very sudden thing. She actually what seemed like if she was like something happened when she was sleeping, but she broke her neck. Her neck was broken. And just very mysterious, kind of a situation. She fell, and just the way that she fell, it was very sudden and unfortunate. Well, my mom immediately called me and told me that had happened, and I just I couldn't not consider what had just happened, you know. Um, and so then I, knowing, being now in a position where I'm a follower of Christ, a believer and follower of Christ, I went to prayer and I asked God. I said, um, God, I don't understand what's happening. What is this? Like, should I pay attention to this? And I said, is death going to come into my life? The season of death going to come into my life? Because that would happen, throughout our lives. It would be like these seasons where our close family members would just die off. Either they get murdered, or other crazy things would happen. But anyway, so I said, well, is death going to come? I feel like this impending doom. Why do I feel this impending doom, God? And I felt Him tell me. And I'm sorry if I'm like a little bit angsty about this. It's still very fresh. It's only a year ago, so I'm still dealing with the repercussions of it. Okay, and I'll give a little bit of context too when I talk about it. Um, I said, I really don't need this right now. I said I'm running a business that we're about to close on a $1.4 million deal. I'm about to buy a gas station. I'm about to buy a house. I am finally in a place where I've been able to build my career again to where I could be a millionaire. And this, if you're telling me that something's going to change, that's a problem for me, because this is the plan that I thought you had me on, to come to Oregon to build this business, to to do what I'm doing, and but also too, at the time I was so burnt out. I was so obsessed with the pursuit of wealth that I feel like I had lost my way. And in a weird way, I feel like, I had also been getting into, during the COVID pandemic and all the shutdowns and stuff, you had a lot of time on our hands. I started getting into the conspiracies. I started seeing different things. I started to kind of perceive things in a more higher level, it seemed like, after a period of time where I was in this like lull, I guess you could say. And so I said, well, what do you want from me? And he said the same thing. He says, I want you to surrender. He says, because I have a plan for you. You've been pursuing your plan. You still are doing things your way, but he says, I want you to do things my way now. And I was like, okay, well, if you're gonna do this, I said, I need a confirmation. I need confirmation that it's like a real sign from you. Like, I need a sign. Well, very shortly after, I get a call from a friend that I hadn't talked to in many years, and he lives in the Middle East, and he is a missionary that goes into the most dangerous parts of, that part of the earth, and ministers to terrorists, basically. I mean, this guy has a divine protection, similar upbringing as me, and he feels like he's doing God's work out there. And so he came out, and he flew out across the country, across the world, to come and see me specifically. And I'm like, you couldn't have just like Facebook messaged me or text me or call me, like you had to come see me. He says, yes. He says, God told me to come see you, and in person, and deliver a message that he has for you. And I'm like, okay, wow. He says, yeah. He says, God is going to strip away everything that you have now. Everything that you have right now is going to all go away, and you're going to have to make a choice. You're going to have to continue to pursue mammon and forget what God has done for you, or you're going to choose to surrender and finally allow him to break you to the point where he can use you as a vessel to shine his light and what he has for you to do. I thought that was very odd, because that coincided with everything that I had been experiencing. Okay. And so I took heart to that, and I was so moved by it that when I went into my prayer meditation with God, I really fully felt like I surrendered 100% completely, because sure enough, the very next week, a girl that I had been dating and seeing, she left suddenly. And not only did she leave, but she left with essentially the rest of the money that I had left. She took this luxury, $100,000 travel trailer that I had bought, and just took it and ghosted me, left me with nothing. And not only did she leave, I was still running a business. So I'm staying with one of my employees, and I'm trying to close this multi-million dollar, or this million dollar deal. And I have employees that are counting on me. I'm supporting families, okay? And I'm starting to see the pieces of this like house of cards come down again. And I start to see, I'm like, oh man, Galio was right. And God confirmed it. Like, I'm going to go through a major change in my life, and I just need to surrender, and I need to just trust God this time, because I feel if I don't, God is going to kill me. Like that's how I genuinely felt. I said I felt like I'm like reaching this point in my life where I was about to be 40. I came to this point in my recovery, my personal, spiritual, mental, and physical recovery, to a place where I felt like God had granted me the ability to be in alignment with who he calls us to be, which is his image. And kind of going off in the weeds there, but I went to a place of deep despair for a moment during this meditation, because I considered ending my life, you know and the surrender went in stages. It was like an onion, because I was like trying to accept it, and I said, okay, I surrender, I understand things are coming. But as things were coming, I as things were happening, it was very challenging, and I started to get that old feeling of bitterness again, of feeling abandoned by God. Does that make sense? Of like it was like there was like a whispering in
Yeah.
my mind of, see, God is abandoning you again. And then I was visited by another entity that I'd never had seen before, and I didn't recognize. But this thing looked like, it was like, it almost looked, the best way I can describe it is it looked like Egyptian, you know.
That's interesting.
And it was during this time when I was in prayer meditation. And when I say, like, when I'm in prayer meditation, I do feel like I astral project, you know. Some of those residual things happen, and I feel oftentimes that I am able to come in and out of my body at will, if that makes sense. um I've learned to as I've gotten into God's word and really starting to see, the truth of what he wants us to do and not, like I tend to kind of, I'm more cautious, I guess you could say, with it now. Um, but the intent has changed. I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
But so anyways, so yeah, so I got visited by this other entity, and I felt like this thing was again trying to recruit me to, like, hey, there's a war going on, and you've been chosen for a specific purpose. So, but now I could tell the difference. You know, I could tell the difference. I'm like, man, I'm trying to be recruited here for like this spiritual battle. I've got these entities that wanted me align with them and are saying like, hey, like we can make that deal happen for you. We can still make this happen for you. We can make this happen for you, and you'll get the gas station. And you know what? Who cares if your girl's leaving? Like, you're still young and attractive, and there'll be other people. You know what I mean? Like, all this stuff. You'll have all the money you wanted. You can get your kids. Finally buy the house for your kids, all this land, and you're gonna have power. And the town that I was in, just to kind of throw this as a very side tangent, the town that I was in, I got involved in some local chamber of commerce that they had asked me to participate in. So I sat on the board of these nonprofit corporations there, and I was a leader in the community, and I knew all the residences there, and they had entrusted me with their, livelihoods, and I treated them well, and there was a mayor that was kicked out of town, that they kicked them out because of a corruption, and they were asking me to potentially step in and run for mayor. Um, so so I have all this going on, and I'm getting this like inclination of like, oh well, don't listen to that. Like, let's keep going on this path. But it was a very clear message from God, and I always knew when it was a clear message, because he would tell me, but then he would confirm it in some physical way, and at least for me. But there was a mirroring of the dark side as well. So the difference of me was just being able to understand who I am, understand that no one can make me think, feel, or act in any way but me, and no one can influence me and coerce me into doing anything, because I, as a human being, am created in the image of God, and therefore anything that comes against me shall not prosper. And I have made the choice to remain faithful to the King of Kings. Okay. So knowing all this stuff was coming, and then sure enough, um, my business fell apart. And I won't go into the boring details about that, but my business fell apart. The deals fell through. Um, I lost my home. I lost my business. I lost my wealth. I literally saw it just vanish into thin air, and I'm left with literally nothing. And so I feel God has always worked with me on specific dates in my life. I don't know why. Like, I think last time I mentioned, it was September 3rd of 2005, the evening of September 2nd, that I had the drug overdose. And then September 3rd of 2005 is when that encounter with Christ happened. And then he instructed me, gave me specific instructions that on September 17th of 2005 that I would have moved to California. So he's always given me specific dates. So everything was crumbling. And I was like, okay, I need to get out of here. Like, I need to skip town, because I don't have anything. I only had $80 to my name. I had $80 in cash to my name, because all my accounts had been wiped. It was just supernatural. It really kind of seemed. And so I said, well, where do you want me to go, God? And he says, go to Vegas. Because I was thinking about going back to New Mexico. I was going to go back to New Mexico, go back to that same area, and stay with my dad for a while. But I heard him say, no, go to Vegas, go to Las Vegas, where your mom's at. And I'm like, why the city of sin? Like, why are you going to have me go to the city of sin? That's not, I don't know if that'll be good for me. And he says, you don't need to understand now. He says, but the darkness needs light, and I'm sending you for a specific purpose. And I said, okay. So I left, and I left on March 4th. And that was symbolic for me, because for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally backed in a corner of my own pride and stubbornness, and God was able to penetrate my heart finally and break that last part of my ego enough to say, okay, I love myself enough and I love you, God, to let go. And so I let go. And he brought me to Vegas. And we could talk about that some other time because I know we're just focusing on entities, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
What if this new entity, what's the description of it? What'd you discern? I mean, was it smoke or spirit or?
No, it was well, it honestly, like, doing research, because it piqued my attention into looking into like Egyptian
Right,
stuff.
right.
It looked like a dog man.
Oh
Whoa.
wow.
Okay.
Yeah, it looked like it had it looked like Anubis. It had this, you
Right.
know and a very, eccentric way of movement. In all the speaking is telepathic. It's telepathic speech. But yeah, but what was interesting, yeah, and this is a whole other thing, but um I believe that in an astral realm you have the ability to traverse space and time. I know that sounds really, really crazy, but there's been times where I've been taken places. um
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? So that maybe is another conversation for a different time.
No, no, no. There
But
was a guy, I can't remember his name, but he's a follower of Christ, and he says he was just taken like to the edges of the universe,
mhm,
like quickly.
yes, in an
That's
instant.
it's like translating you can translate to another space and time.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's happened several times. I've actually documented each
Yeah.
time that it's happened. Yeah, there's some pretty interesting stories I could tell you that with that as well. um yeah, and one of the times, Leon, I was talking to you the other day of how you've been visited by angelic creatures several times. I had an angel do that to me one time. Came to my room. I was in this astral projection state, and this thing comes in, and it's got the gold, skin, and metallic body, basically, and um, yeah, and just took me on a journey, and it just was crazy. I feel weird talking about it because I know how it sounds, but
No,
I really did experience that.
What journey where it take you?
So the one time that I clearly remember is I was in my room, and I remember dreaming, and in this dream I was immediately woken up, and this was like in the middle of the night. I was immediately woken up, and I was about, I can't remember how old I was. Anyway, I was in my 20s, and so I'm like out of this dream, and I feel that I need to pray, and so I get into position, I do, to pray, and I pray, and I'm visited by this angel, and and immediately it said, "Come with me," and then I'm like, in an instant, we shoot up above the what seems to be the whole earth and heaven, and it seemed like I was like in this position where I can see uh this heavenly realm, and in this space I saw what seemed to be, in the middle, this super bright energy source that I could tell. I couldn't look up on it. All I know is that I felt like I was in the presence of God there. And below it says, watch, it says, look, and at what you see for what is about to take place. And I'm just like enamored. I cannot look away, and I see that in this realm there, heaven was broken up into three different categories, and there was an assembly going on. Like, I was inside of like a gladiator, like a stadium. It was like a massive stadium, and it was I knew it was an assembly of some sorts, but they were broken up into like three different sections, and these three different sections had different entity types. It would look like different entity types, and then all golden metallic. It was all just magnificent. And then on one group, there seemed to be a person of authority that was assigned to each group. And there was other stuff that happened. I don't know how much you guys want to go into detail. It makes me shake when I talk about it, so I don't know how much you guys want me to go into detail about that. I
So,
don't want to derail from the topic.
just really quick, it sounds like something similar to Deuteronomy, the Council of the Gods.
Okay.
When God was, overseeing the council of the gods. And,
What scripture is that, if you don't mind me asking?
I think it's Deuteronomy.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, dude, I think it's 32, I think. I could be wrong.
Okay.
That sounds insane, man. That's crazy.
But that's a time when the when God sent the angels down to earth to oversee the nations, the 70 nations. And that's when everything fell apart. That's when they started worshiping the angels, and then you get into the Anunnaki and the Rishi and all these other crazy stories, But I mean, all of it for me is true, and what's going on with you is real.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I can tell you, I did experience it.
That sounds. I mean, I wish I could see that what you saw.
Yeah, it was very amazing. It's seared into my consciousness.
Wow.
It's quite incredible. So yeah, so I experienced that. I've seen types of creatures like golem, like golem type creature, or like a reiki.
Wow.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
that. Let's get
So
to it.
yeah, so I was probably about, it was like 9, maybe 10 around this time when we saw this. 11. um we'd ride around out there. By this time, we would ride around with motorcycles, dirt bikes. My mom had she had gotten her job at the government Los Alamos National Laboratory, and at the DUMS, there in Dulce. She had top secret clearance. So we would go with her to work in that area, and the friend that lived in that area had motorcycles. So we just ride around everywhere. And in that area, we can ride all the way close to my house, but we were closer to this mesa. They call it La Mesa Negra, the Black Mesa. And what they say that it is they say that it is the cap of a ancient volcano that the city of Los Alamos sits inside of. That the Los Alamos National Laboratory and the area to where in the Dulce base is just at the base of the volcano, whatever. They said it's an ancient volcano, and it's been dormant for I don't know how many thousands of years. I remember it was my grandparents talking to me about it, and other elders of the tribes talking about it. But it was a sacred place. And so anyway, so the mesa was in the middle of the native land. So you had Los Alamos inside the volcano that was run by basically Mormons. It was a Mormon city, essentially. Okay. And Masons and other, white people. That was like where the white people were. Okay. And then you had down the hill, you had the Black Mesa, and then you had 5 Native American tribes that were in 5 different points in geographical areas of this center area that is translated to be Little Spain. And that is the area that I lived. So my friends and I would ride our motorcycles back up and around, and we'd go all the way up to the Black Mesa. And we like to just explore. We would hunt out there, or sometimes we would just camp out there for a few days, and get high on drugs and peyote and just trip out, and just have a good time, because that's what we were taught. We would do rituals out there too, especially with peyote. We would participate. Some of the natives would go out there. Anyway, so we went out there and said, hey, let's go explore. A couple buddies of mine said, let's go explore the mesa, because I heard that they discovered a cave there, and I want to go and see it. And what we were taught is that was the cap of the volcano. So, I don't know why it would be so porous, but they said there was a cave. Anyway, so we went up and we were looking everywhere. We spent all day looking, and we were just like, you know what, we're just going to camp out here, and we really want to find something. So we spent the whole entire day getting into the night. We found this cave up on this corner behind these pine trees, really well covered and like rock, like looks like a natural cave formation. So we're like, hey, there's the cave, cool. So we went up into it, and when we went into it, what was really amazing was I remember the first thing that I saw is I walked in, and up to the right was a fossilized fish inside in the side of the cave wall. It was like a fossilized fish. I was like, yo, check it out. There's a fossilized fish. And out there you'd find seashells and other things. We'd find all kinds of things. So we're like, oh, super cool. And I remember thinking, I got to tell my uncle about this because he was the family archaeologist and genealogist. So, anyways, so we were like, hey, let's see how far this cave goes. So we go down this cave, and it goes in, I would say, probably about 100 yards. And we're just like, we were just fearless. We're like, let's just do it. So we just walk down in there, and there seemed to be like this warm air coming out of this cave. And it's like, wow, dude, it's like really warm in here. It's like there's a heater on, and we were kind of laughing, like, oh, did you fart? Or something. Like we were just like kids joking around with each other. So anyway, so we find the end of this thing, and when we get to the end of this thing, there was a ditch, like a man-made ditch that was at the end of this thing, and it dropped down about 6 feet, and there were two tunnels that one went to the left and one went to the right. And out of this tunnel, there was warm air coming from the right side. Okay, only from the right side. And and what would trip us out was when we looked down in there. Well, all we saw a bunch of bones. We saw a bunch of elk bones and deer bones and things like that. So immediately we were like, oh shoot, we may have just stumbled upon either a bear cave or a mountain lion cave. Like, we need to get out of here. So we got our stuff and left. But that stuck with me, and we ended up, camping the night, further down the hill, went home. Well, I got intrigued. I'm like, that's really intriguing. I'm like, told my brother, I'm like, man, those caves were crazy, right? At the Black Mesa. Like, I wonder what that is. And all of his friends were kind of talking about it, and I was like, I need to know. Like, I need to know what it is. So we go back up there, and I'm like, there has to be like an opening, like to this tunnel. Like, I want to find where it could possibly be, you know. So we're kind of going around around the base of this mesa, trying to find, okay, based on where the cave is, like, where could it possibly be, and kind of said, okay, well, if anything, it's between that way. If it's a straight line, we're going to try in this area. So we go in there, and we just like, we're trying to dig for it, trying to look for it. And one of my friends was like, well, why don't we do like a ritual, to see if we can, if we could see anything out here. And so anyway, all of a sudden, when all this was going on, we saw that the ground started to shake. It was like an earthquake. Now, to give a little more context, in that area, they were doing underground bomb testings all the time. So they would shoot a bomb underground, and then we would have these like earthquakes. We'd feel them all the time. Sometimes it was like once, twice a day, where you hear the alarm go off. They would launch it, and then you can actually sometimes see the ground kind of move like water in that area, and or whatever they're doing down there. I don't know what the heck. I just assumed that they were bomb testing. But anyway, so but we didn't hear that this time. But the ground started shaking. The next thing you know, this opening became visible, and so we moved some rocks around, and I was like, dude, this is the opening to the cave. And I almost felt like, I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, I was physically able to find this opening here, and I felt like I had help from the outside. I felt like I was guided here, and again, being indoctrinated with all these religious beliefs and mystical beliefs and all this stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, this is something of significance. So we open up this cave. I'm like, oh, so cool. And I wasn't expecting to see any entities. I wasn't feeling anything. I wasn't seeing anything. I was literally just curious and having fun. And so, get my flashlight. We walk in, and I remember walking in, and my brother was like, I don't know, we should go, that far in. This looks kind of creepy. And I'm like, don't be a wussy. Let's go. And so we go in and we get in probably about, I want to say 20 feet or so. And I point my flashlight up and I could see a silhouette in the distance. And the silhouette was this, it would look like a mummy. It looked like a mummy. It had its hands like this in an X, and it was squatting down and it was sitting on its legs. You know, like when you're sitting on a wall, you right, and you push back on a wall and
Yeah.
just kind of like resting on your legs, right? It was like that with its head down. And it looked like it was mummified. And I'm like, yo, yo, yo. It startled me. I said, yo, dude, look, check it out, check it out. I said, dude, I think we found a native mummy. Like, dude, I think we found like a mummified native, like here in the rocks. And
Wow.
so I'm like, let's go check it out, you know. And so we start walking towards this thing, and the next thing I know, this thing picks up its head and it turns its head and it looks directly at me, and like it gives off this like like this breath and this like dust, and it just let out this breath and looked at me, and it had red eyes, red glowing eyes, and I froze, could not move, was paralyzed. And I'm like looking at this thing, just all of us are just frozen stiff, just looking at this thing. And I thought to myself, okay, this is different than anything I'd seen before. And so I just start like backing up, and I'm just like, hey, like, we're not here, you know, we're not here to cause trouble. Like, we're gonna leave now. And we start backing out, and this thing just like looking, and it's like standing up and like kind of like breathing, and we just back out very slowly. And when we get back out, we just close up the rocks as quick as we possibly can. We jump on a motorcycle and we skip out of there. So that was another
What the heck? That's crazy. That sounds like to me like I don't know. You said it was I don't know, like maybe it was like in hibernation or something like that, and then it just woke
I
up.
don't really know. I didn't go back to double check. But what was interesting though is after that happened, there were actual reports. So later on that night, we went back and we went home. Later on that night, we were all like, did you see that? You know, talking with each other. Did you see what the heck was that thing? Like, what did we see? Like, was that the devil? You know, like we're like all freaking out. And but later on that night, starting from the Black Mesa, there's the little town, you know, the tribe that's there. The dogs at midnight. That started at midnight. The dogs started howling from the area of the Black Mesa, and it howled in succession all the way, and it went past our house.
That's crazy.
And
So that thing was
and it literally, like, the dogs all the way up our street, and then it stopped, coincidentally enough, it stopped at my grandfather's. And there was even reports of people's dogs being killed. Like, there were several dogs that were killed along that way. So that was very interesting. And that would happen every now and again. You would hear it and be like, oh, that thing's coming out again. So we would think, like, is it that thing? You know? And my brother claims to have seen it again, walking in the river when he was walking, because we lived right next to the Rio Grande. So the Rio Grande would cut through, you know, down the Colorado River, and then it would cut right through where we were at. In our land, we had access to all of that. So, you know, that we was just all free place. So we just could walk in and wherever we wanted, right? Not get hassled. So, yeah. So that was that. Yeah. Any questions? Or you guys want me to talk about more or what?
Did your brother get a better look at it?
He said that he said he saw it in some bushes when he was and like it was like watching him. And he said him and his friend were afraid, and they just ran from it. You know, that was basically it. It didn't attack. All he said that he knew was that he needed to get out of there. Like, he just needed to run,
Sounds
to
like
run away.
I don't know when you're telling that story. It sounds something like Phil Schneider when he got zapped by some reptilians or something in Dulce. That story
Interesting.
where his
I'm
fingers
not
were,
familiar with that story, actually.
yeah, his fingers were, and he was
Oh, yes, I have heard of this. Yeah,
he supposedly committed suicide. I mean,
really.
yeah, yeah. It was
His name is Phil Schneider. Interesting. I've heard of the story. I didn't know the name though, but I heard that somebody that had happened to somebody. I was like, oh, that's weird. but that makes sense, at the same time.
The whole red eyes and yeah, man, that's just
so interesting. Yeah, I mean, it could have been a reptilian. I don't know. I mean, all I know is that this thing was terrifying. Like, it was absolutely terrifying to look at.
Yeah, man, dang.
Yeah. Yeah, and then and then not to mention just all the UFOs, man. I mean, like I said, me and this same best friend of mine that lived in Los Alamos, and I liked hanging out with him. He was this cool white kid, and his uncle is actually in Hollywood, a very big movie star that I cannot mention his name, but very big movie star to this day that was actively in the occult, and he became a believer, and now he does Christian films. But just for sake of privacy of the family, I'm not going to say who it is.
You kind of narrowed it down.
The
So yeah,
we
can talk offline about that.
What I see about UFOs today is I mean, we see a lot of strange things out here in the desert. I don't know what they are. It could be military drones, top secret. I don't know, but they're weird.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
when you talked about this stadium or this council of these metallic-looking beings, and being translated, being moved around by an angel. In your opinion, do you think angels would need a flying saucer to move around?
No.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
No. It's instantaneous travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anytime I've experienced a UFO, because I've experienced two kinds. I've literally seen one in a warehouse in like a hangar, right? I've seen that. And then I've also seen them manifest, like literally like blip into existence and like just like land. And they're very different. Like I could tell like what's a government drone, shoot. And I had seen one, speaking about the Dulce, base. A friend of mine, what I was getting into is a friend of mine were out there again riding motorcycles, and we had seen the side of the hill open up. And this is why I was saying at least seen the gates, because the side of the hill opened up, like literal side of the mountain opened up at the base of this volcano, and out came an F-16 jet. It came out and went northwest. Out then from behind that, a disc shaped craft came out behind it, and it had no sound. You could hear the jets, but this thing, it just was just flying so smoothly. And then right behind it was another F-16 jet that flew up behind that, and then the gate closed.
Wow.
And yeah, that was really wild. And we had never seen anything like that. That was actually the first time I had seen like a UFO. And weird story about this. So my friend, he was completely freaked out. Like he was completely freaked out. And I was like, hey man, you know what? Let's just keep this between me and you. Like, let's not say anything. Because I don't think we were supposed to see this, because we kind of, I don't know if I should say this. We're kids, right? So we're out there, and sometimes, you go past the no do not cross sign. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So we're out there riding on motorcycles, in this environment, and we'd go past these do not cross signs. And so anyway, so I'm like, hey, we should keep this quiet. And like he started blabbing about it. And like, went and told his parents, he was telling everybody. I'm like, dude, like, you need to stop talking about it. Well, shortly after, he was riding his motorcycle through town, and he was hit by a white van, and he was killed. Like he was gone. And yeah, that was really interesting. And then, and after that, I was like, I'm not talking about this with anybody. Like, I'm not saying anything. So I don't know if that was a, just a coincidence or what. But we're saying he really did die. So yeah, so that was that. Other things I've seen is I've seen, like I said, the UFO manifest. There was one time I was staying in the area where I grew up. At this time, the community was a little bit bigger. Another friend had moved into town. Like I said, there was a family of white people that lived close by, and they were blacksmiths. That was their trade. Well, one was a scientist, some kind of a scientist inventor, and then very wealthy. And then there was the blacksmiths. And then there was a couple other, families that had various duties, but I was staying with my friend who was the blacksmith, and they had this big trampoline. So in the summer nights, we would sleep out on the trampoline because the stars out there in New Mexico are just phenomenal. You could see the whole span of the sky. And so we're out, we love just look up at the sky. Well, we were laying down and we see this like blinking up above us, and I'm kind of like tripping out. I'm like, yo, dude, do you see that? He says, yeah, what is that? And then all of a sudden, this like almond shaped like craft like just blipped into like our site, and it flew right over the trampoline, and we were just like flipped out. We turned over on our stomachs and we're like watching this thing, and it flew over and it landed in the field. It was like about 2 fields over, but we can very see it. It came down and it landed, and it had landing gear. The landing gear came out and it landed, and literally, this door opened up and these creatures walked out of it, and we were just standing there just like in awe of these. They were tall. They were tall gray aliens. That's what they looked like. They were very tall, and they were moving around. I still remember the movement. One came out and he kind of looked around, and here, okay, now I want to make sure I mention this. In this area is filled with nothing but cow farmers. So this is why they call it the ranch. Okay. And so we had cow mutilations there, all kinds of things. So they landed in the field where, these cows were. So I think that they must have been doing something like that. But anyway, so my friend was like, he made some loud noise and he actually got a rock and threw it at their direction and caught their attention. And when that happened, they immediately got into this craft and took off. And that was that. They got in, landing gear came up, and boop, it just blipped off into the sky, going northwest, where we were at. So, yeah, that was another incident that happened.
That's interesting. And we were talking about the mountaintop where the F-16 came out in the saucer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That sounds like there's two ways for me on that. Either the military is working with them, or they have developed their own technology through craft that have crashed. One of the two.
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
Because, during this time, so my mom worked in the information technology, and she worked in the IT division there in Los Alamos National Laboratory. And I remember she had brought home. This was, I think I mentioned this last time. Did I mention about the smartphone? Yeah. So she had brought home this device that looked just like a smartphone, except it was all chrome. It had a chrome covering, it had a chrome screen, and then it had chrome all around it. But it looked just like this. It was a smart, and this was like 89, 90.
Cell phones back then.
Right. So this was a long time ago.
Wow, that's interesting. It really is.
No,
go ahead.
Oh no, yeah.
Wow, that's a wild story. I mean, I've heard a lot of stuff about Dulce, and some people believe there's something there, and some believe there's not.
Yeah, I mean, the locals know about it. The locals know about it. I mean, even my mom was like cautioning me. She's like, you should be really careful, talking with these things, because, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah, careful, exactly.
Right, but right, and I understand why, and I've always been one of those kids too that ask the question why. You know what I mean? Like why? Like, people should know this, and that's the whole reason why I've decided to come forward, and even talk about it, because for one, it seemed to be entering into the mainstream, right, of people's consciousness, and I genuinely believe that we're turning an age, and we're coming into an age where what has been occulted is going to be revealed. So
exactly, I believe that too. I remember seeing a huge triangle with Lionel, and I called everybody. I called all the airports. I called the military base. Did they see anything? And it was strange because there was a black vans parked down the street for like a few months with a bunch of antennas back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like really strange about it. I mean, why would this black van be out there off and on for 2 months or 3 months, whatever it was, with a bunch of
Right.
and so that kind of rubbed me wrong, like maybe it's something you shouldn't report, now, because if you get too close to these things, if you have too much information, then they'll probably you.
Yeah, and that's why I refrain from some information,
Yeah.
and just say that, allegedly, But I mean, honestly, too, like I'm at a point, man, where I know this might sound black pilled or whatever, but I'm tired. It's been a long time. I've had to deal with so much, and not say anything about it. And when I found Christ, I just was like, especially like this last year, I'm just like, man, I can't, like I have to speak what is truth. You know what I mean? Like I have to speak truth. And I can't hide. I can't hide what, like he says, don't hide your light, under a bush. Like I can't hide. I feel like I'm being, because believe me, like I it's uncomfortable to talk about it. You know what I mean? And it's affected relationships, like even like my girlfriend and I last night or 2 nights ago, kind of got into really kind of our first, I guess, argument, you can say, where I thought the relationship was going to end because, of, stuff that happens, stuff that happens even just talking about it. You know what I mean? So I understand that, like, I'm in a war. I'm in a spiritual war, and if I get taken out, I get taken out, you know. But I live and die for the King of Kings, so I feel it's a duty, you know, because the dark side, they're recruiting as well, you know, they're recruiting as well, and more of this younger generation, they're becoming infatuated with it, and that's on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they are
absolutely.
I think, it doesn't take much of a push to say right now that there's something very much going on that is elevating the consciousness of man to be able to see these things or to experience these things. But I believe it's being because we live in an occulted realm, right? We live in a fallen realm, hidden from God, essentially. So, in my opinion, the whole realm has been occulted, but we're starting to see the mechanisms of that system being revealed, right? Those things that were suppressed when, God, flooded the earth and kind of reset the game board, if you will. People are really, these old watchers and Nephilim hosts, or these Nephilim spirits, they are trying to bring upon the end time, and that's very apparent. I mean, I don't think that. I mean, I get. Anyways, feel like I'm rambling, but that's
no, you're not. I mean, it's there's nothing new under the sun, as the Bible says, and when you look back on the old gods, as you said, they will come back. They will come back. They'll be released again, in my opinion. These are the Anunnaki, or the seven sages, or the seven Satans, Enoch in the Bible.
Right, the Ha-Satan, yeah.
And I think the younger generations being more influenced by UFOs because they're interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Start thinking like, oh, well, Star Trek, Star Wars, we can travel the universe and this and that. Well, I mean, for me, when I look up at the sky, I see stars. I don't know how far that is, and people are talking about traveling through space and going to Mars. You know what? I don't know anything about that, but I know that in there's a passage in the Bible. Gosh, what is it? I'll remember it, but it says basically that you will fly like eagles to the stars, but I will bring you down, says the Lord. I think it's Micah. Might be Micah.
I'm gonna write that down.
There's a lot of things out there in these circles. People talk about especially a lot of Christian podcasters. You talk about a lot of UFOs because a lot of it is demonic.
Right.
And probably 100% of it is. But when someone says that angels are flying in UFOs, I just light up, and I see red, because you know what? You're misleading people because you don't know that.
Right.
See,
That's honestly, yeah.
they want to tie that into the when Elijah was taken up into a fiery chariot, or the chariots that were seen in the Syrian army, whatever it was. But when I look at this, I look at scripture and I said, well, there was a burning bush. There's the fiery seraphim. There's a pillar of fire in Exodus, and Jacob's ladder. The angels were descending to from earth to heaven. They didn't have saucers.
Mhm.
So what's this burning fiery chariot? It could be a seraphim enclosed,
Could be, yeah.
encapsulated, or just the presence of God, His power all around. But to
Mhm.
say that there's angels and saucers, I just take exception to that.
Right, yeah. No, I'm in agreement with you on that.
Yeah.
Now knowing what I know, and I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
you're going into,
I have,
well, now knowing what I know, having been saved by Christ. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, I'll just say I don't fully agree with what he said, but I do agree with some of it, because we can go down the down that thing and say, well, why do angels need swords and shields? Why do they need
Right.
armor? I mean,
Yeah.
why
Right,
do they
yeah.
need houses in heaven and windows and doors? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's impossible for them to have technology
Oh, absolutely.
as every
Yeah.
piece of technology is a counterfeit of God. So if the demons or angels have UFOs, well, they must have seen a better one somewhere else to
Mhm.
copy it. They must
Mhm.
have seen a better pyramid somewhere else to build it. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
And I also think,
example.
yeah, and I also, just to let you know, I also think that angels that come to you with gold skin and metallic body armor, not all of them are on the Lord's side.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
could
true
be
too.
too. Yeah.
Okay, because it's just, you get a different sense. It's a different, what's the right word to use? It's like a different frequency. You know, Aliens are not angels. Like that, I can tell you that for sure. You know
Spirits or
that
something.
I believe. I'm. It's almost like, I don't know. It's almost like what I've seen, because whenever I've come encounter with them, um, I don't know. It's really kind of a mystery to me. I haven't really tried to like understand it. I've done some research anyway, and I've heard theories of like that they're some kind of a bio kind of a skin drone or something, like a suit,
Yeah.
or like a Nephilim spirit, to indwell. Now, like, all right, so going down this a little bit, so with the Nephilim spirits, I'm sure, I mean, just talking to you guys now, I know that you guys are knowledgeable about Nephilim and being, the disembodied spirits of demons, being the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim and things like that, from the hybrids. Like, not all of them are like crazy, erratic, and like dumb. You know what I mean? Like, they're very intelligent beings, and they are. Have you guys heard of Dr. Jerry Marzinski?
I mean,
No.
You guys need to have him on your show. He's a clinical psychologist and psychiatrist that was in the field for over 40 years, and he's a Christian man and doctor. And dealing with these schizophrenia patients, he came to the conclusion, and he's trying to get his work published, but he's being heavily banned right now, on that he's convinced now through his research that people who suffer from schizophrenia and other type of disassociative disorders are being victimized or targeted to be Nephilim hosts. And then you start going into really complicated information in regards to what Gary Wayne talks about with bloodlines of the Nephilim, right? And them integrating into society. And then you start talking about the serpent seed and other things like that. So that's a way other road to go down. But you know, I definitely think those are linked, because when you encounter when I've encountered like a gray alien type, especially the small ones, they seem to be more erratic, like somebody who is like has schizophrenia. And when I have, like, when my brother has been in his schizophrenic episodes and things, um, in me experiencing other people like that, it almost, I get the same frequency, and they're the same, very similar characteristics that you can see physically manifesting. So, anyways, that's just my experience.
I was about to say we got about 30 minutes left. You want to get
Yeah.
into the ritual stuff?
Yeah, sure. Be good to talk about that. So specifically, you wanted to know about like why certain rituals happen.
Why is there always rape involved? Why is it sexual? Why is there blood? Why the children? Why the cannibalism? And
Yeah.
then even for the first time I ever heard you tell me is that some kids don't get touched at all, and that's
Mhm.
like why? Like all this stuff is really weird to me.
Well, usually when because there are virgins that are preserved, and those are preserved to a certain age, to then where they are, essentially ritually sacrificed. There's rituals. Sacrifice has been, it's been done, you know, since the beginning, right? So it's, nothing has changed in that regard. So, the natives, well, I don't want to pigeonhole any specific group. I'm just saying that like it's just been proven through history that this happens, and there's a very real aspect of Luciferian occultism that demands for that, and they see real results from it, whatever power that they get, and so I genuinely believe that my sister was chosen for that. She died a virgin, and just the way that she was taken out, it just seems too suspicious to me, and there's no way I can ever prove it, but in a way I could just tell by looking into the face of one of my friends who I know. He was a very loud proclaiming Satanist, and he was proud to be a part of the Church of Satan. And I know that they did participate in those things. I've been a part of, animal sacrifices where they skin a dog alive. You make a magic circle, right? And hang a dog in a ritualistic way, skin it alive, and then they would put on the skins, and then transform into these skinwalker type creatures. So
What? Wow, that's insane.
Isn't that something
my,
that
my grandfather had this ability.
isn't that something that Jonathan Dover told us, the Navajo Ranger?
Yeah, he said there's something about skinwalkers. There's two of them. There's skinwalkers that are like cursed because they got cursed for some kind of bloodline thing, or it's done through rituals.
Right, and I've witnessed more of the ritualistic side of it.
Yeah, I guess it's in
I've
your
I've, phys-
DNA.
I've physically seen my grandfather transform into one, and I've seen my first cousin transform into one
What is it like? Is
after he was brutally raped, brutally.
so?
Um,
What is a rape? So the rape connected to the transformation, or what?
yeah, yeah, because what it does, and it's kind of going into like stuff with talking about chakra, right? Activating root chakra, and the root chakra is like down in that prostate area, and there's something about that. I haven't dived too much
Oh,
into research into that, but it activates. It's like ejaculation through the spine. I think they call it like path to enlightenment. Um,
what?
Yeah, it's something about
um,
going through your anus up to your spine and your head or something like that.
Man, that
right.
is
Well,
sick.
yeah, because
It is.
like in the religion, like in the Thelemic, practices, magic with a K, is used to channel or raise spiritual awakening, right? And higher levels of consciousness. Well, they say that inside of the inside of the anus, I guess, with the the way that us, human machines are made, it activates something. It pushes a button that then causes you um to activate. That's the only way I can say it, because when that's the only way I can describe it, because when it was done to me, I felt this process happening, you know, and it was done to me in a very ritualistic way, you know, and so I all of a sudden became aware of something extra. I don't know. I feel like I got an upgrade of some kind, I can't explain it other than that.
Oh,
And that's how like that's how you can be like really whisked into it and like dive into it, because it's I don't know, it just, yeah, so that's kind of what those are that's really for. And I think that when you are activated in that way, it gives you like this genuine sense of power, and you do feel like you have this connection to the divine, you know what I mean? And then that with just, continual, spoken word and, doing sigils and, things like that, um, allow you to transcend, I guess. That's kind of my knowledge about that so far. So, from my experience, anyway.
Insane. It's like, so the Kundalini thing goes all the way through the third eye. You said your forehead started hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and it's really interesting. Like, I suppress it, but like, okay, so this is gonna be weird because we're kind of getting into like bleeding into like who I am now, and I don't want to give off a misperception of myself. Okay, so like I want to make it clear. And this is why I say I'm going to make it clear, at time over time as I'm telling the story to kind of bring people back and into what the truth is that the truth is like, all this stuff is happening, right? All these things are happening, but it really is about the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is Jesus, right?
Right.
He is the center of all things, and all things are created for him, by him, and through him, and he has use of everything that is made, and so coming from the background that I did and having experienced these things and thinking that my life was going to be used strictly for evil, has been flipped on its head, and Christ has said, okay, I'm going to use you for good, and I'm going to prosper you, and I'm going to whatever that means, however that looks, and I'm going to use you according to his perfect will, where I was taught it's my will, you know and we're getting into influence with my grandfather in, he was influenced by Aleister Crowley, and now knowing what I know, was influenced by Thelema. I don't have the documentation for this, I will say that, but I'm convinced that he was a part of some orders. Like I said, the secret chiefs I know because they would talk about that all the time, but also the OTO, and or the Golden Dawn, you know, and as we know, those are secret societies, right? So they all have those esoteric magic rituals and practices, and they use a lot of the same thing: focused intent, um, specific postures, even when they're doing the acts of rape and other things, right? Certain positions to be in, right? You get more talking into yoga type work, breath work, all those things, and they are doing it because they want to connect with the other side, and they want to connect with the spirit realm, which is very real. Whenever I experience it, there is a physicality to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not like, I don't think it was and it's I'm in this belief because I'm still, even though I've been serving Christ for since 2005, I'm still, I feel like I'm in my infancy of like my walk with, I'm not saying maybe not that, in my knowledge, like learning about like God and how he works, you know what I mean? um because when you look at like the occult and you look at the practices and everything, it mimics God, but it's like inversed, and so like I see a lot of the similarities on the light side of what is truth, and there are things that are done right, our prayer, our meditation on God's word, our speaking of, proclaiming victory out loud verbally, right, saying those like incantations of like, we ourselves and acting in this like, I'll say religious practices, are participating in these rituals, you know, and peeling back for a moment, peeling back the opinion that's been kept on the occult of like, oh, it's all evil. Like I said earlier, I believe that our whole realm has been occulted. We are in an occulted realm because our realm is fallen. And so because it is fallen, it has to abide by specific rules, and that or tools. And to me, what I have seen is the tool that is used on either side is religion. We talking about thelema, and their practices and all these other things, and same thing with Christianity and all the denominations, right? And so yeah, I feel like I'm kind of going off on this tangent, but yeah, you guys have any thoughts on that? Or
Well, with everything that you're saying, I mean, I still have more questions, but
yeah.
a lot that you're saying is making a lot of sense. And when you're at these rituals, did you ever see like any I always hear about creatures that are there sometimes. Like there'll be like a
Hmm.
creature in a robe, giant
Hmm.
creature, or some kind of thing would manifest out of the circle. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
does that stuff happen too?
Yeah, there was one time that we were at a powwow, and there was a big, like kiva, what they call it, a big kiva.
Yeah, yeah, I know the
This,
kid.
yeah, it's like, essentially it's like a big magic circle. But anyway, so and there's rituals that are done around, but yeah, they summoned what was like a Bigfoot type creature. It looked like a Bigfoot,
Yeah.
you know, and they would, and I was like, I remember seeing it, and I was like, whoa. I mean, this thing was massive. I mean, it had to have been, you know, 12 feet tall. I mean, this thing was
Oh
massive.
wow!
And I'm like, where did this thing come from?
And
You
what
know,
did it do? It just I mean, dude, like when you say
it
it's just
screamed,
from
it thrashed around, and it was like bound, like it was like bound. It couldn't get out of there. But and I was only able to see from so far. I couldn't be like right up in there. I wasn't part of those,
Wow.
those rituals. But you know, it seemed like there was something, now looking back, that the elders and people involved were getting there was some kind of a, like a symbiosis happening with
Hmm.
there. And they would give it things, right? They would give it sacrificial food, and it was like a habitual, kind of a thing. So
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Do you think they were pulling that thing from Earth? Like, do you think that Bigfoot was like maybe 20 miles away and it teleported it, or do you think the
I
Bigfoot
think so.
is
Because there was
spiritual?
nothing in there.
Okay.
That's
This thing appeared out of nowhere.
wow.
And that's what like makes me, that's like the more intriguing thing. Like that never doesn't get exciting seeing that, because it's really like intriguing. It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're right there. It's like, wow. And yeah, and having been talking about like Bigfoot type creatures, for the past 7 years. Well, here's a good kind of wrap around as we kind of land this thing. Is All right, so there was a period of time where I was in this lull, okay? Like I was in this like in between space. The other time that I was attacked by this Galio character was again, it was in March of 2017. And no, I'm sorry. Yeah, March of 2017. Yeah, and this incident actually put me in the hospital.
Wow.
And it was the actual fracturing of my marriage completely, like unsalvageable. So I had been, my son was just born. Quick story. My son was just born. He was maybe like 6 months. And I was really busy. I was this tech consultant, civilian contractor, the government agencies doing their tech consulting. And so I was always busy. I was always doing that. So I was very stressed. My marriage, like I said, had trouble from the beginning. And so my wife and I were kind of on in a rough patch at this point. And I was going through what I didn't realize at the time. This is before I got really like real help. Excuse me. So where I really got like help for this, professional help, is like I was starting to experience, like it was becoming overwhelming. I wasn't seeing anything. I had almost forgotten about it when I was in California. I call this the grace period, because I was in this period where I didn't see anything. I didn't see any entities. I didn't feel anything. I was able to build a very successful career. Like I was doing really well for like 3-4 years, and then actually about 7 years actually. And then I started dealing with severe PTSD, and I started having these symptoms of where I would just be like taken over by something, and I would just black out, and I'd go into these fits of rage, and I just couldn't control myself, and I became very abusive, verbally and emotionally abusive to my spouse, and would have these episodes where I would freak out in public and just not be able to function. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I need help in this. And so I sought help. Um, my ex-wife at the time, she couldn't deal with it. She didn't understand. And one night I was in the living room and I was sleeping on the couch again. I was, dreaming, and then all of a sudden I'm awakened, like always happens. I'm awakened in the middle of the night, and I see Galio standing at the door, the front door of our apartment. And I get up, and I didn't even have a chance to say anything, but he, with just this, he transformed into this, like, all I want to say was like a venom type creature, and his hand, like, he reached out with this hook, and it just put it into my skull, and and just like, it was like I was being like held down with like a hook, like an anchor, and it picked me up and threw me, literally physically threw me against the wall of our living room. And I remember my kids and my wife were asleep in the next room. I woke up the kids, they start screaming. She comes out, and she doesn't see anything. And she's like, "What are you doing?" Just like completely angry with me. And I told her, I said, "Hey, I'm being attacked by something. I'm physically being attacked by something, and I need help." And we got into a huge argument that night. Well, anyways, he left, and I was just trying to get my bearings, and um, I was really, really, really upset. And she's like, "Well, just calm down. It's okay. Why don't you just come lay, in the bedroom with me?" So I'm laying there trying to sleep, and then something came over me and just told me, "Go kill yourself." And so I got up, went to the kitchen. My wife was up, still, at that point in time. Gets up and goes and says, uh, she tackles, she tackles me with a chair. I was trying to actually, I started to slit my throat. She came at me and tackled me down, and at that point, I couldn't hold on anymore. I checked myself into a psychiatric, place, and was like, something very real is happening to me. My wife at this point was not safe. She didn't feel safe being around me or having her kids be around me at that time. And so, yeah, a little bit vulnerable telling that story, but that was a physical altercation that happened with that being. Yeah.
That thing's a nightmare. I looked up the name. It means lives on milk. That's
Wow.
what it means. Galio. It means lives on milk.
Mm.
Does that trigger anything? Lives on milk. It's weird.
Not really. Just questions. It's interesting. I'm gonna have to do some research into that. But yeah. So, but after that, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I was just tired. I was tired, and then I was visited again, um, by it in this place, and again it told me your life's gonna change. And I went to God, and I cried out to God, and I said, "God, I'm in the middle of the city." And I said, I'm so tired. I need to heal. I wish that you would pluck me out. I wish that you would literally just take me out of the city and put me in the middle of the wilderness, so that way I can heal. Like, I just need to heal. And I got this opportunity, to move, to uproot from California and move to Oregon, and take over a small family business in freight and logistics. So, and also too, my ex-wife had come to me and said, "Hey, I would like to try to reconcile with you and give this like one more college try." So we moved up and went to Oregon, and I won't go into the details. It's just too long to go into, but things fell apart very quickly when we got up to Oregon. So I'm like, the contract that I had required me to be in the Pacific Northwest in the woods, literally like sometimes 7 days a week, like, sometimes 20, 40, 70 miles into the forest. Okay. And so I would be out there by myself. And what I had on my delivery route, I even have to go out there with a chainsaw and clear trees, and and you'd see bear out there and elk and all kinds of wild animals. Well, I had this period of time after that again where it was like this lull. There was nothing that happened for several years, and then the pandemic happened. And shortly before the pandemic happened, I was driving out there on my route, and I saw a Bigfoot. And I started to see, and I have pictures of this too, I could send you, but
Oh,
not of the Bigfoot per se, but I took pictures because in on my route, there was like these huge, massive trees, that were like snapped, on a certain level, like 15 feet up. And there's no, I mean, when I show you the pictures, there's nobody out there, And all of a sudden I see the snap tree, and I'm like, oh damn, lightning or whatever, because that would happen, or heavy wind. But then on this one specific spot, there started to be left these like items of like what seems to be gifts. Like one time there was like a stack of bones that were like stacked in a really organized manner, and then there was like a set of like elk hoof legs that were put in like an X configuration, like in the middle, right in the middle of the road. Like it was inconvenience because I would
Yeah.
drive on my route and I would have to stop and move it.
Oh.
So, but then I actually saw one. I've seen them several times. First time I saw one was I was driving around this corner, and back there, these loggers would be back there, and they would spend weeks out there, clearing massive areas. And if you ever want to hear a good Bigfoot story, talk to a logger, because I mean they see them all the time out there. And so this logger was coming down, this one gulch, and I'm coming up and around it, and I can hear him. So I'm coming around the corner, and I see some ruffling in the trees as I'm coming around this bend, and I see the ruffling, and I see this bear running, and I'm like, I was like, wow, that's a big bear, and I'm like, I wonder if he's chasing. He's got to be chasing an elk or a deer. So I look down to see if he's chasing where the deer is. I don't see anything, but I see more ruffling. I look back, and there I see it. It's this gigantic Bigfoot chasing after this bear, and this bear is running down to the river. It's because the road would go along this river. So this bear runs, and I'm like, I'm gonna maybe 200 yards away, and it runs into the road, and just I'm like, oh my gosh, that semi truck, and I'm trying to honk my horn because I'm like, that semi truck's gonna hit the bear. So I'm honking, and I'm like honking, I'm flashing my lights. I can't get his attention. Sure enough, the bear runs into the road, and the semi truck just blasts this bear and just destroys it. I mean, just completely obliterates it. And so bear blows up, he slams on his brakes, and I come up on it, and I look up, and I try to find, like, I try to see where the Bigfoot was, and nowhere to be found. It just was gone, just like that. And
That's crazy too.
That's insane,
yeah,
bro.
so then I stopped the logger. He's like, oh, where'd that bear? That bear came out of nowhere, and I'm like, yeah, it was like a Bigfoot was chasing it. Bigfoot was chasing it down the hill, and the logger was like, yeah, he's like, yeah, it's probably from that family that we chased out down. We're clearing, he was telling me that they're clearing this whole area. He's like, yeah, we chased them out this way, and yeah, we come across their nest and stuff all the time, and we just
What?
chase them out of the way.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he was just nonchalantly talking about this, and
Yeah,
I'm
it's
like,
like another day.
yeah, and I'm like, what in the world? Like, but I remembered, like, but seeing it triggered a memory of my childhood. It triggered a memory, and this is what kind of God started to use these things to to be putting the pieces of the puzzle together. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, interesting. So every day I would drive out there, and I would listen to Spotify, and I would just listen to music. I'm really big into poetry and spoken word, so I would like either freestyle, hip hop out there myself, make nobody would see me, whatever, like singing in the shower, or I listen to music. And then this intrigued me of like, okay, well, this is interesting. I wonder if there's like any like podcasts or anything that like have to do with this. So I looked up, like Bigfoot podcasts, and out popped Blurry Creatures. So this is where I started listening to Blurry Creatures, and that's what got me down the path of like, oh yeah. And then I started commenting, and that's when Dan Duval reached out to me. So, but anyways, yeah, so tying it all in, I mean, there's more experiences that I could talk about. I mean, I know we're coming up on the end of time here, but do you guys have any other questions for me, or
Yeah.
anything else you want to talk about in the next, few minutes?
No, that was interesting when you were discussing Bigfoot. Because I remember going back to Jonathan Dover, the Navajo Ranger. He said that he went to a reported sighting of Bigfoot on Navajo land, and the witnesses says that it just came out of the ground, dude. Like it was a spirit, and then it formed. And Jonathan Dover says him and his partner they tracked it for several miles, and the footsteps just disappear.
Mhm.
So these things got to have some kind of spiritual aspect to them to be able to disappear like that.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some kind of I definitely think because they have a different feeling, a different vibe about them too. It's a different frequency. So I definitely feel like they're of some kind of either remnant Nephilim seed or some kind of chimera hybrid, something or other. But I definitely think it's some kind of Nephilim type class. But when I saw it though, like I was able to see one enough where it like looked at me and I saw like it, like conscious, like sentience. You know what I mean? So again, I think there was some person, because you would hear stuff out there too. Like I'd be driving, and you'd hear like cackling. You know, you're like, what is that? You know, it's like it was almost like a language. You know, and I remember hearing this guy. I forget his name, but he put out some recordings of like some chatter. You know, and you hear that. You know, you hear the wood knocks out there. Rocks would be thrown. Sometimes big boulders. You know, would be
Oh,
like
yeah, that's common.
boom. Yeah,
Big
I'd be at doing a delivery, you know, at a mailbox, and I'm going around the corner, and you see a big huge boulder just land, and you're like, I'm nowhere near a mountainside. You know, I'm out in the middle of a tree, you know, field. There's no big rock that has to be thrown. It's like, who is throwing these rocks? I'm like literally 35 miles into the forest, like there's nobody out here, you know, and there's, you know, so anyway, yeah, just crazy stuff.
Oh, that is crazy. So let me ask you this: what do you
Yeah.
think about Bigfoot?
um, I, you know, I'm honestly on the fence now because I've kind of gone down that rabbit trail, and I try to make sense of like what it says in the Bible, you know, about if there's anything that says, it talks about anything in the Bible. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you guys are familiar with the Prometheus Lens podcast.
No.
No, a little.
Yeah, so this guy, he's a researcher, and he's of this belief that the Bigfoot is actually a descendant, some kind of tie to Esau, Jacob's brother,
Yeah.
who developed the Edomites. Yeah,
Mm. No, I don't know about
that's
that. It's
I don't know
interesting.
about that, but that's just what I've heard. You know,
That's
other than
random.
that, yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like
other
it's getting
than that,
dirty.
I think it's some kind of a Nephilim.
Yeah, and I think so. I think it. For me, it probably goes back to the cave dwellers in the Bible, the Horites, the hairy ones. And it could be. I
Oh,
don't know. It's all just conjecture, but
interesting.
I mean, it could be.
So, what did you say, the Horites?
Yeah, the Horites. I think it's like the Bible says, we shouldn't be going out and searching for these things.
Right, I agree.
Like you're seeing things just they come to you. Like me, I see UFOs that come to me. I'm not, I sit outside and I'll see one once in a while, but it's just really crazy. And I think a lot of it ties into if you have native blood and we have native blood,
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say I could tell. Yeah.
and we've had our shared experiences, man. I don't want to relive them. It's
Yeah. Same.
just the other night, dude. I was up at at 3 o'clock in the morning getting some water or something, and on the back of the house, man, three loud booms, boom, boom, boom. Like, what the heck was that? Something was pounding on the wall 3 times. It was hard too. Like it was heavy handed. I was like, man, I can't go out there right now, man. I think sounds a lot
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
really strange. You know, that's why they call it things of high strangeness, because it is very strange, and I don't quite understand it, honestly, and I don't think it's my job to understand it. At this point, I got really into I got to a period where I was researching into it so much because I was trying to just understand it, right? I was trying to, like, because when you see something that you don't understand,
You get interested.
um,
Yeah.
right, and it's going to drive you crazy, right? Just trying to make sense of it and like help to close the loop of your thought process. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm glad it's being talked about more, because I think that, like, again, like I said, coming back to, I think that they're priming. I think we're seeing like the great deception being activated, and the great deception is going to involve the unveiling of the spiritual realm, and I definitely think that that's happening right now. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. All that stuff you said is pretty wild, dude. Man, we gotta do like a video to all this, like an AI video to all this stuff that you see,
Yeah,
to put
and
a
I'll
picture.
send you the pictures that I have,
Yeah,
because I know I sent you that one.
Oh yeah,
So,
the one of the angel. I got that one.
mhm.
Didn't you say something about a Bigfoot picture? Or the trees, the broken
I
tree.
have a picture of the trees, and I have a picture of what I believe is a footprint.
Okay.
But I have very clear pictures of structures. You come across like what they see when they find them, like there's this one that was really compelling that I watched. I want to say it's Expedition Bigfoot, where a group of scientists go out, and they come across some of these things, stuff like that. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Go
and
ahead.
I know that some family members also have some pictures and stuff like that, and some video even, but it would be hard to you know get them to come forward. I mean, I'm hoping at some point I can share that information, but yeah, like
You have a Miss Pie for another show. Do you have anything on Area 51?
um, I do, but that is something that I can't talk about.
Oh wow. Oh wow. All right.
Yeah, no, so because my mom, that's another reason why, like my mom ended up in Vegas, you know,
Right.
because of her workings with the government. She was commissioned on a project here, and that's all I can say.
Right. Oh, that's fine.
Okay. Cool. Wow. Well, that concludes for the show. That was a very interesting show, and we didn't even touch probably on like half of what you probably seen. Huh? You probably got so many
No,
stories.
yeah, there's a lot, but
Nice, nice. That's
one
good.
thing I want to end it with. One thing I want to end it with is this. If I can just say
Go ahead.
something, is I just want to end it with all this stuff. I'm not trying to bring any glorification to the kingdom of darkness and saying these things. What I believe truly is God is revealing what has been done in the darkness into the light, and everything that I say and proclaim, I do to the glory of Christ, because He is the one and only truth. And I think that anybody that is intrigued by this, just don't forget that Christ is way more intriguing.
Amen.
Absolutely, amen. And thank you again. If you want to go ahead and leave, your plugins, you got a website, all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So working on the website, like I said, I didn't anticipate doing this. I've kind of been stubborn, and God is kind of pulling me kicking and screaming into doing this. So I do have a Rumble channel right now. It's called Beautifully Broken. So if you go on Rumble and you search up Beautifully Broken, you'll find me on there. I'm just fairly new. I have maybe 7 or 8 videos on there, and it's in podcast format, but it's so there's no like imagery. It's just like the logo with voices on that. But the focus on that podcast is, I feel like God is, because there's plenty of podcasts out there now that are dealing with conspiracy and all this, and talking about all this and exposing the darkness, but I haven't really seen a lot of dealing with the healing and the recovery for people, because there's a lot more people out there than what we know and realize. Is there are a lot of people who are not going to come forward because the shame is so thick and it's so heavy, and they've been wounded so badly that they feel dirty, damaged, and different. And so I felt like I needed to create this podcast to help people who have been traumatized by the dark forces, and by even being abused in a ritualistic way like I have, to find true healing in Christ and what He has shown me in the knowledge that He's given me through the Christ-based therapy I went through. So that's what that is. You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at decode the mystic. That's at DKODEMYSTIC, or DKODETHEMYSTIC. And that's where I'm at right now. If you want to connect with me on Facebook, I'm at Gregg Romero. You just look that up, and you'll see like an avatar of me there. And yeah, that's my stuff.
Thank you very much for giving us your information. We will talk to you soon. We're going to close out the show here. Thank everybody for listening to the Sabbath at Midnight. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares. And as always, please like, share, subscribe, follow on all our platforms. All the platforms are in the description of the episodes. And if you want to become a member, that is also in the description of the episodes. That will help us out a lot. God bless you, and thank you guys very much. Have a good night. We are in California, and it is the 10th, and it is 8:30. Have a good night. Stay on the line. We're going to get with you in a minute.